Hvala lijepa. Poštovane dame i gospodo, naš sljedeći panelist je Lord Anderson of Swansea, gospodin Donald Anderson. Gospodin Andersone, izvolite.
Mr. Chairman, colleagues, I also am a journeyman politician with some reflections, but I first ask for your sympathy. The agenda is long and time is short. I work it out that I have minus a quarter of an hour to give my own reflections, and also probably everything which can be said has been said, but not everyone has said it. So, two reflections. First, the nature of the global challenge. There is, I think, among think tanks and politicians, a substantial degree of consensus. Understandable, because the world they are looking at is the same, but also because many of the participants are the same. When I looked, for example, at the US National Intelligence Survey, that was informed by a large number of Europeans who themselves, interconnected with others, went home and produced their own report. So the consensus arose. And that consensus includes this, that part of the challenge is today existential. Clearly there is the climate change, the disappointment of Copenhagen. There is the question of the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, and the NPT review conference was at least encouraging on this occasion, certainly far more encouraging than the review conference of 2005. Then the other question or consideration is that almost all the challenges are interconnected, whether it be terrorism, whether it be the question, the pandemics, whether it be global challenges arising from the criminality, chronic poverty. These are all in their different ways interconnected. Factor two of bringing in new trends, and Robert will know the contrast between that document which he helped to draft in 2005 and the document, the European Union Strategy of 2008. There were new challenges, not just on the horizon, but with us. These included cyber warfare, as we saw in Georgia, and not warfare, but used in Estonia. It included piracy, and indeed the Operation Atalanta is one of the real achievements and triumphs of the common security and defense policy, another building block on our way to a serious European contribution in this field. So new trends, yes. Some neglected, we're very coy about talking about the world population explosion. It may have moderated, but it includes not only a competition for resources with major effects on the developing world, but also conflicts, military conflicts, as we saw in Rwanda, as we see now in the Horn of Africa, and even in Gaza, where in Gaza, how does one manage a population which in 1948 was 250,000, is now 1.5 million on a small patch of land, where how do we educate, how do we give proper health, how do we find jobs? And alas, the population dimension is too often ignored. Well, quickly, that is my first very brief reflection on the nature of the challenge. The next is, how do we respond as Europeans? The obvious temptation is unilateralism, to retreat into our own national positions. But there are a couple of common features. First, as our Spanish colleague said a moment ago, the indispensability of the United States. Although all the projections are for the rise or the movement of economic and political power from west to east, the enormous pressures, for example, on the defense budgets, which makes us more selective in what we do. The Royal United Services Institute in the United Kingdom has forecast that over the next 6 years, our European defense budgets will fall by between 10 and 15%. Already we're falling far short. How many of our countries, look at ourselves, the UK and France do well. But how many other countries achieve at least even the 2% of their defense targets? We're fine on rhetoric. We're not so fine on achievement. So we have very much to do, but we certainly, the projection is of this massive move from east to west, the almost Spenglerian decline of the European Union in terms of other areas. And we move from that clearly to show that we need to work together. There need to be alliances. The economic context is very unfavorable, which means that we perhaps have to look more, not just at heavy defense, more mobile defense, and a defense which tries to prevent conflict and which seeks to build capacities also in the third world. And that may be a greater emphasis in the future. Looking at our institutions, how well have our institutions adapted to these new challenges? Remember that most of our European institutions were formed either after the Second World War or in the Cold War period, like the post-Helsinki 1975 arrangements. And we have to ask, how relevant are they? Each of these organizations produces its own vested interest, and rare indeed is it for one to terminate one of these institutions. The Western European Union will die properly in the summer of next year. But there remains a void, a problem, that under Lisbon, the question of defense is still the responsibility of national parliaments. Unless I give this challenge to foreign ministers here, is there serious thought about the successor organization bringing together national parliaments to ensure that there is proper accountability of European defense? Certainly the European Parliament needs to be there, not even as first among equals, as this is a national parliament responsibility. Then what about the OSCE? This has been sidelined by Russia, partly because of human rights considerations, election monitoring and so on. Where was the OSCE in the recent Kyrgyzstan crisis? We have to ask these rather serious questions. And what about the proposal for the new structures by President Medvedev? It came at a bad time, at a time when Russia was, inverted commas, invading Georgia, but at least it deserves consideration, although perhaps Russia itself is allowing its own proposals to slip off the table of consideration at the moment. I end on this, that globalism, yes, needs strong regions and strong sub-regions within those. Europe is our region, and we must respond accordingly. Yes, the US is also indispensable to us. European enlargement must come, and I invite everyone here to imagine a map of our Europe. There is one area, one part of it, the Western Balkans, which is a blank in terms of the European Union. This is the piece of the jigsaw which is yet to be filled. All these countries are manageable, all relatively small in European terms, all must be managed properly for the future of our Europe. I'll say only this in cultural terms. I was, a couple of years ago, in Zagreb. I had a free morning, unusual, and went to the cathedral. I looked at the various stages of building of that cathedral, which seemed to mirror so much of those in other parts of Europe. And I reflected, here is a real European country, and Europe cannot be complete without Croatia and the other important countries of the region. The fundamental challenge for us, I guess, is this also. What is our Europe? As Prime Minister Fillon said yesterday, Europe is a community of values. We have to be true to ourselves. We have to project, so far as we're able, the rule of law and human rights. And that can only come if we are true within our own countries. We can only make a significant contribution in terms of values, human rights, press freedom, dealing with minorities on the international stage if we, in the Delphic way, know ourselves and ensure that in each of our own countries corruption does not flourish, organised crime is countered, and that we can proudly look at the moral values of our Europe. Thank you.